perhaps the place to start really, and I think the purpose of this discussion is to simplify what appears to have become a very complex issue. And first to say that electricity is not different from what you and I learned in our physics in school, energy resulting in alternating current, and all of the technical processes. But to say that if you remember the principle of the dynamo and the magnetic fields and all of that, that's really what it's all about. And it's no more than that. The principles, and so the power plants that we have are nothing but very big generators. So just like our generator at home, the small one, the very popular one, I better pass my neighbor, it's just multiples of that. So just like our generator at home uses fuel, whether it's diesel, whether it's petrol, the big power plants use fuel. The fuel sometimes is gas, sometimes is water, though you have a hydro plant, sometimes it's coal. So we just need to understand that we're just dealing with big generators. There's no mystery here. So let me also say that our energy supply is behind the growth of our population. Today, in March 2016, we have just about 5,000 megawatt of power on the national grid for about 180 million people. Now, we've been producing power since, I think, 1961 or there, 1960, thereabout. ECN, the predecessor of PHCN and NEPA, was created by a 1950 ordinance. It started operations in 1951, so roughly over 60 years. And in 60 years, the total cumulative power that we have generated is 5,000 megawatt. We reached that 5,000 megawatt just a few weeks ago, this year. So if you do a breakdown about 66 years of 5,000 megawatts, you look at averagely about 75 megawatt of power every 1 year. And when you look at how our population has exploded, between 1950, I think it was about 37 million. Even then, corporate Nigeria, as is known today, had not evolved. It was North and South and Protectorate and all of that. By 1962, I think we were about 47 million. And now we are 180 something. So part of the problem we have to deal with is how to equitably and sufficiently distribute what is not enough. Clearly not enough. But again, possibly, and I believe, can increase in geometric proportions if we all do the right things. 1 year ago, the holy grail for power was 4,000. That's what they were chasing. But in less than 1 year, we're at 5,000. And if we now do the right things, we won't have the outages that we have. Instead of fixing and trying to stay at 5,000, then we should be moving on to 6,000, 7,000, and probably be moving in leaps of 2,000 megawatt. And I think that's where to start, really, to just understand that background, that there is nothing esoteric about it. It's more how much we want it and the price that it is going to take from us in terms of our behavior, in terms of our restraints, in terms of our sacrifice. That determines how much more of it we can get. Well, I think before we go to reforms, let us also understand why reforms. For until about 2013, which is over 60 years ago, government was the provider of electricity. Nobody else, government. Except for a few gas to power initiatives by our joint venture partners like ExxonMobil, Chevron, some IPPs, in order to convert the gas that they were producing. Government was the operator in generation, in transmission, and in distribution. So let's just understand that. And then the people of Nigeria said, government is not efficient. Government must change it. In fact, government should hand it over to private sector. That's what the people of Nigeria said. And in 2005, our elected representatives, speaking on behalf of the people of Nigeria, because the senators and the House of Reps are representing you and I, they sat down in our National Assembly, representing one constituency or the other, and passed one law, the Electricity Sector Reform Act of 2005. And that was the beginning of reform. So in talking about reform, that's where it started. And they were listening to the people of Nigeria who said, change it. That reform was concluded in 2013 November. That was the privatization that the last administration did. And it ended in the sale of 17 companies, I think, broken up. 6 generation companies called the Gencos and 11 distribution companies called the Discos, sold to private organizations with government retaining certain levels of equity and ownership. But majority interest had been sold to private owners. The only one that government kept was the transmission line. That transmission system is the one we colloquially call the high tension. That's the transporter in the whole value chain. So I will now go to that value chain, because you talked about how power is produced. In that value chain, again, it's important to talk about the fuel source, because it defines the price of electricity. Today, we have power produced from 2 main sources, 2 principal sources, gas and water, which is hydro. Now, before you get gas, you either have to take gas from oil production, which is called associated gas, because it's associated with oil production, or you take it from natural gas fields that have little or no oil. And so you need to set up a gas processing and production facility. That's a very big machine that you must raise money in order to construct. So people must understand this. After you have produced the gas, you now have to pipe out and pump the gas into the generator. So it's like building your fuel tank at home, and then you put that pipe that goes into the generator. Now, from the time when the gas is going out, there is a meter saying how much gas I am sending to you, the generator owner. At the point of intake, when you are receiving the fuel, which is the gas, you also have a meter that is measuring how much. So just like your generator at home has how many liters of fuel it can take, is measured, because you have to pay for that fuel. And then when you use it and turn the machine on to produce energy, when you are sending it to transmission company, the transporter, there's also a meter at the generation end saying, I am sending you so much power. So he too knows what he's carrying. And when the transmission system is receiving it, He's measuring also and say, oh, I got 10 units of power. And then he's delivering it to the disco. At the point when the disco takes the power in, he too has a meter saying, oh, you say you sent me 10 megawatts of power. I received 9.8. That's what I'm going to pay for. It is now the disco at the last end that does the dirty and hard business of getting it to hundreds of thousands and millions of homes. At the point when the disco is pushing out too from its substations, if you go to those substations, you will see meters of what is going to each substation out as bulk power. And then it is metered from the transformer end into our individual homes so that it can be measured, the money collected and paid back to everybody. Now, the impression perhaps has been created that the disco collects all the money. That is wrong, it is false, it is without basis. The maximum the discos collects about 25, maximum 30% of what they collect from consumers, because they must now pay the transmission company, they must pay the generation company, and they must pay the gas company. Once there's a default on that value chain, the power system is in trouble. Because you need continuous supply of gas, continuous supply of energy, continuous wheeling of energy. So if you are an operator or a transporter in that system and you don't get paid, will you continue to render service? Now, this is the reforms that have taken place. Will it work? I believe it will work. Does it have challenges? It does have challenges. Is this the best that could have been done? Certainly not. It could have been better. But we can bemoan yesterday. I don't want to bemoan yesterday. I want to deal with today. I want to plan tomorrow from today. See the problem. And that's why I'm going around from one power plant. And I've been to Kainji. I've been to Jebab hydro station. I've been to Egmi gas station. I've been to the old Oji River power station, which used to run on coal. It's been dismantled. There's still many more to see. I've been to several transmission stations, major transmission stations across all the 6 states in the north-central area of Nigeria. I have been to them. And my learning still continues because I need to see what I am employed to manage. I've heard about it in the briefings. Now I'm now going out. So some of the things I tell you now come from what I have seen, what I understand, what I am still learning more of. And so some of the people who come to speak without ever visiting any of these formations, without knowing how they work, I wonder how our people find them believable and credible. And I will address some of those comments as we go on. With privatization, government is no longer distributing power. Government has handed over distribution to those 11 distribution companies. So all the things that NEPA used to do, come and fix your transformer, come and fix your broken wire, come and do your 33 kV cable, your all of those things is now the work of the discos. All of the transformers in your area, those 3 lines you see on your street, are now assets of the distribution company. They don't belong to government anymore. Let us understand that. So if your transformer is broken now, it's not government that should repair it. It's the private disco. So they are supposed to do that from the 25% they get from the tariff price. They are supposed to, because if there are no transformers, they too can't sell the power. Government still has some NIPP projects that it is completing. But otherwise, largely, generation is also now from those assets that have been sold. Egmi, Kainji, concession, Jeba, concession, Geregu sold, and all of them. So, government has also restructured itself to now play a regulatory role, like a referee, ensuring that those operators do their work, put money into the business, recover their money, because if they don't recover the business, the system can collapse. Make some profit, but they must not profiteer. Again, then government stands between them and consumers to ensure that consumers are not extorted. There's no profiteering. So that's really the role of our ministry now. We're two there, myself and the Honourable Minister of State. So that's really our role, really regulatory. Now, there are active agencies that have come with the reform. One of them is the Electricity Regulation Commission, NERC. NERC is actually the official that sanctions, that regulates price, that determines so many things. There's also NEMSA, a safety agency that fixes the quality and codes and all of that relating to meters, installation of poles, stringing of lines, that just regulates how things are done safely. Then there's MBET, a company, Bulk Electricity Trading Company, Incorporated, to stand as the stabilizer of the financial issues between gas, GENCO, transmission, and DISCO. Currently, all of them have contracts with one another, but not all of them are able to fully discharge their obligations. If you leave them now as they are, it seems like the best way to say is they will tear each other apart. So that's like the financial balancer, like the wheel balancer, that don't worry, I will collect your money for you, keep producing. Don't worry, we'll guarantee that you will get your money, keep producing. And we'll sort out all the liabilities. So, but that is happening because the system is still very fragile. The privatization is just 2 years old, November 2013 to now. As we go on, MBET will eventually get out so that GENCOs can deal directly with DISCOs. Contracts can be facilitated, guarantees can be enforced at the time when there is enough power and the system is robust. So it's a process in transition. The best I can liken it to with our experience with reforms is perhaps to look at when we first started the telecoms industry, 2 years into the telecoms industry. You could only text. You needed to pay 30-something thousand to get a SIM card. If you remember. So, you couldn't send videos. But look at what you're doing on it now. And the very early signs of reforms that we're talking about in the power sector are already there. Some of the discos, and I think Abuja Disco, you can buy power online. We're already moving. You can reload your meter online. That's progress in very short time. But there's going to be a lot more, because we will ultimately get to the full retail of the business where you can change your source of power. You can buy for anybody you like. Just like, who thought that you could keep your number and move from one subscriber to the other? If they told you that 15 years ago when we were doing, so all of this will happen. Are we the only country that have gone through these reforms? No. And this is important. Brazil has been through it. India has been through it. I think China, Mexico, and South Africa. In fact, I'm reading a book now, written by some research fellows in Cambridge, I think the political economy of the power reform sector, comparing all of what they went through. And it's not too different from what we are going through. Everybody made some mistakes along the way. But really and truly, if you look at those countries, the electricity is more stable now than ours. So, and if we've gone through it only for 2 years and they've been there for much longer, it shows that we've done some things right. Power is too strategic, just like fuel. to live entirely in the hands of foreigners. And as a matter of national security, we can't leave all of our power to foreign investors. They can play in the environment as they already are. There's investors from Power Africa, Obama, Chinese, everybody's playing. But look, listen, it's a strategic security asset. That is one side of it. But the other side of it is that if Nigerians, and we have complained, Nigerians don't invest in their country, they keep their money abroad. Some Nigerians have now invested in their country. They deserve our commendation, some support, some token acknowledgement that they could have refused to invest at all, or they could have even taken the money abroad. When you look at economies like the United States today, and you can't talk about the prosperity of the economy without talking about people like Rockefeller, JP Morgan, Carnegie, and so on. They built the first oil wells, they built the first rail lines, they built the steel plants. JP Morgan financed the production of electricity, although it's much more known now for banking and finance. And I think that in my own little way, I like to imagine that I'm seeing that generation of Nigerians beginning to emerge in funding infrastructure, strategic national assets, and venturing into entrepreneurship. That's my sense of it. Now, the interesting thing is that in the last few weeks, especially this year, there has been an enormous appetite for investment in the power sector. International brands that I've worked with when I was governor have come, and they're seeking to invest in buying some of the equity of the existing distribution companies or into some of the generation companies. Capital is coming into power, a lot of it. There has been, perhaps wrongly placed, if I may say, an enormous appetite also in letters that I see. A lot of proposals for power. Unfortunately, they are wrongly directed because people still haven't migrated from the old NEPA and PHCN and government. People want to supply generating power plants. Also, the government is not buying that power anymore. So this might be the best place to say that those proposals should be properly directed now to the generation companies where you want to generate, or to the distribution companies where you want to supply distribution equipment, transformers. The federal government of Nigeria is not buying distribution equipment again. The only thing that we are doing now through TCN, Transmission Company of Nigeria, is building our transmission line. So the hundreds of proposals that I see should be rightly directed to the people who need the service now, not to my office anymore. For those who want to generate power, their applications and their license applications should be directed to NERC, the Electricity Regulation Commission, who is authorized to license. So we are just supervising the architecture of how everybody now playing by the rules. But to be sure, there's a lot of appetite for business, especially in power. In fact, we just approved about 14 different solar projects to generate a combined capacity of 1,286 megawatts. And that's the biggest aggregation of solar project that the country has ever undertaken. But those projects will be delivered for another 12 to 18 months, depending on how quick they come through. But they have been difficult because of the tariff and the price. It was difficult to really close agreements. Now, I think it's important for the information of the public to understand that when you get a license to generate power, the journey has just begun. You now need, if you are using gas, to get a gas aggregation agreement to guarantee supply of gas. Otherwise, you will have some of the kind of projects we have today, like in Geregu, in Omotosho, Alono Oshogo, where the gas is not enough because it wasn't well planned. But I think with NEC and MBET now, they insist that they need to see a clear agreement that guarantees that that plant will have gas before they sign a PPA. A PPA is a power purchase agreement. Once you sign a PPA, it is almost as good as done that that plant will be built. Because once you take the PPA to the bank, you get money. Because what the PPA means is that there is a guaranteed purchaser who has agreed to take the power. So any bank will fund that. And it was PPAs that we used when I was governor to build all those plants for our water works, for Lagos Island, for Lekki, for the free zone, for mainland in Ikeja, for the hospital and all of that. Once you sign the PPA, take it as done, that project will happen. So in an environment where there is not enough gas, where there is not enough price, you won't sign a PPA. Once you don't sign a PPA, there is no power project. And it's important for people to understand this as well. But what we're trying to do is to reduce the time frame in which this is done. And perhaps this should take me very quickly to the issue of location of the power production facility to the source of fuel. It's a very, very important issue. Once the power production, the generation plant, is far from the source of fuel, what it invariably means is that the cost of that power is going to go up. You understand that very clearly. So, we have an energy policy that I made, but there is no energy mix. That's what I'm working on now. To develop an energy mix, because we have many sources of fuel. We have solar in the north. And what we are doing now is to find the most prolific solar area of the north, and I think it's looking like Jigawa and Kano, where the irradiation is at the highest, and classify that area as our solar belt. Get land there from those states and know that our solar development for the next 15, 20 or 30 years will come from that place. Put more solar manufacturing plants in that area, and this way we reduce the cost. Then it is much more efficient for us to plan a transmission program that evacuates all the solar from one place. We're looking at the middle belt, north central, for the most prolific area for coal production. As you will also see, that area and parts of northeast, in places like Taraba, will have a mixture of some solar, of some hydro because of the projects that are coming there like Mambila. And as you already know, you have Kainji and Jeba and Zungeru, which is under construction now in Niger. So the energy mix for that area will be a combination of solar, hydro, and some coal. For down south, in the south-south and southwest, it will largely be gas. In parts of the southeast, it will be a combination of gas and coal, because the mines in Enugu still have their historic capacity, which my colleagues in the Ministry of Solid Minerals are looking at. So once that energy mix is completed, which should happen before the end of the second quarter this year, it is easier for investors to then know that if you want to do gas, stay here. If you want to do solar, stay here. If you want to do coal, stay here. So all the transmission problems we have had, oh, we have this, we can't evacuate all the power, will go away because it is now planned. And then this will affect pricing. Because if you put a gas power plant in any part of the north today, and you have to pipe gas from the south over 500 to 700, 800 kilometers, the law says that for you to arrive at the tariff, it must factor in your investment and profit. So that will include the cost of the pipes, the cost of the power. That's going to be a high tariff. It would have been better if you built a plant in the gas location in Niger Delta and you transported the power through transmission. Transmission is actually cheaper than pushing gas over 700 kilometers. So these are some of the errors. Thankfully, there are not many that have been made in the past that we don't want to repeat in the future. Let me say first that as minister, I have no power over tariff. Any interference that I make in tariff will be an unlawful one. I have no powers over tariff. But I have an opinion on tariff. And I think it is important to make that point. The authority vested with deciding tariff matters is NEC, the Nigerian Electricity Regulation Commission. I've made that point. They were created by the 2005 law that the people of Nigeria, through their elected representatives, passed, and I think it's a good law. The power to review tariff is vested in the provisions of that law, I think around section 76. If you go to their website, you'll see all what they need to do. Now, when I became minister, of course, they would not set tariff without notifying the ministry. And the important thing to say about tariff, first, this last tariff, is that when the privatization took place, the last administration knew that they were not doing market tariff. It's important to say that. And I think that they should have been honest and open with Nigerians to say this is the price. But they sought to inch the price along, especially because of the advent of elections. And so people had already begun to get an impression that tariffs were just going up every time. So instead of taking us to that tariff once, they were inching us to it. And so the impression we got was every day this thing is going up. So I understand the frustrations and the reactions that trailed the last tariff. But you see, there are two broad things here with these two tariffs. The old tariff was going to continue to go up. And how did I know? I was the first person who opposed, in my opinion, I have only opinion, when I was briefed that the tariff was going to be reviewed. And I asked them, why are you reviewing the tariff? Why can't we have power? It is not fair. Those were my initial reactions when I first became minister. And then they took me through all what had happened. And in fact, the tariff had been reviewed upwards by the last administration. It was reversed because of elections. And during that reversal, liabilities had accumulated. About 200 and something billion liabilities had accumulated. In order to validate what they were telling me, I called a meeting with all the discos. And the discos took me through all the challenges that they were facing. It wasn't that they were without blame, but these were the realities. And that if we kept the tariff going like that, 2-year tariff, in 4 years' time, Nigeria will be indebted to them by about almost ₦1 trillion for an asset we had sold. So we were going back to an era of subsidy for people who were supposed to be operating commercially. I couldn't recommend that. If we had ₦1 trillion to spend on power, why didn't we give it to PACN? That was my first thought. Have we ever spent ₦1 trillion on PACN? Perhaps if we had spent ₦1 trillion on PACN on a sustained basis, we wouldn't be where we are today. So this was what changed my thinking, because without a doubt, as I've continued to tell everybody who has, there's a problem with gas. Gas production for local use was low because the price was not right. Local gas use was selling at $1.30. And for export, it was $4. If you were producing gas, where would you sell it? So we needed to raise that price so that we would get more gas to our idle power plants. So by the time I became minister, that decision had been made to add $2 to the price of gas, to take the price of gas to $2.50 and to allow for 80 cents transportation, which came to $3.30 from $1.30. If gas is the major raw material for producing power, how sensible then is it to expect that the major component, the palm oil that you use for cooking your soup, the price will go up and the price of your stew will not go up? So that was the basis when I surrendered my objection to tariff. As I said, I have no authority, but I have an opinion. And I saw that this tariff, as challenging as it might be, was really the driver for gas. It becomes the incentive to supply gas. If we get more gas, we will get more power. How did we reach 5,000 megawatts? We haven't built any new plant. We just got more gas into the existing power plants. And the more gas that comes, there are still power plants in Geregu that have 6 turbines. Only 2 are working. 4 are idle. Each one of them has 115 megawatts of power to produce. So that's 460 megawatts of power idle. Omotosho is running at half speed. Olorunsogo is running at half speed. The old Lagos IPP built by Governor Tinubu, now managed by AES, is lying fallow in Lagos, 240 megawatts, no gas. So if the price of gas is not right, you won't fire those plants. It's that simple. That was why it made sense to me to support it. But the decider was NEC, not me. There's still a lot of work to do. What I can tell you is that if we get the cases out of court against the tariff, we get the cases out of parliament against the tariff, because I believe that businessmen like to deal with their regulator, not with politicians. They understand business rules, they don't understand political rules. Then you create stability in the market. Businessmen are confident. They know that the game won't change. They will take positions. And in that way, you will see first incremental power. If you don't have incremental power, moving from 5,000 to 8,000 to 10,000 to 15,000 megawatts, you can't equitably distribute what is not enough. So if 10 of us are thirsty, and we have only 1 bottle of Ragolis water of only 30 cl, it's not going to quench our thirst. So we need to produce more Ragolis. Now, it's like asking the person who is producing Ragolis to say, go and buy more bottles to supply us, okay? When the cost component of, say, the source of water has gone up, but we are not ready to pay increased price, will we get enough water to drink? This is the logic behind it. And electricity is compounded by the fact that you can't store it. Once it's produced, it must be used. But the more power we produce, the more stability we will see. I can guarantee that. But I can't guarantee that people will not go and cut gas lines. I can't guarantee that. I can't guarantee that people will not go on strike and go and shut down distribution companies or transmission facilities or the control center in Osogbo because they want some of their colleagues to be kept at work. In shutting down those facilities to protect a few people, do those people understand how many people they actually discomfort? Is it profitable to discomfort a whole nation in order to protect 200 people? Because that's what happened in Ikeja Disco. If there's a dispute about a policy in NNPC, about restructuring, is the answer to a welfare issue that can be negotiated, that can be resolved, or that can even be litigated upon in a court or before an arbitration panel? Instead of choosing those options, the options that we chose was to shut down the gas lines. And so we shut down 13 generation plants. Was that the best answer? I can't guarantee that people will not behave like that. Now, those are the people who are supposed to be producing the gas. They are the ones actually shutting it down. The people who are supposed to be producing the energy are the ones shutting down the distribution companies and the gas companies. So it's not the president, it's not the minister. So let us have a rethink about the productivity of that workforce. What are they doing? What are they contributing to our national productivity? Because, as I said, I'm a lawyer, so I don't know a lot about the technical side of electricity, except what I'm learning. But you know what? Very highly educated engineers like Engineer Makoju, Babatunde Raji, have operated in this ministry. It wasn't because they were not good enough. It was because of some of these attitudes. So as far as the technical capacity lies, we have it. But it shows you that if it was technical capacity, I know Engineer Makoju can fix things. But he can't run a power plant on his own. People were employed to do that. I know that Babatunde Raji knows everything about gas and everything better than I could ever discuss it. But he can't go and operate a gas pipeline. The job of minister is to coordinate all of these forces together to move to productivity. If there was a war today, President Buhari, with all his military might, won't be the one carrying the gun. It's to coordinate. So that's a productive force. What are we getting out of it? It's a question we need to ask. It is when they sign up for uninterrupted and qualitative production that you can then guarantee what we're talking about. Deregulated, privatized, regulated, they are terms of art. The real purpose is to allow business to operate on a commercial basis in order to create competition, in order to engender productivity. Now, meters in electricity production are not just things that you can buy as freely as you buy telephones. Because there are codes, there are standards, because of safety as well. Improperly installed meters become a potential source of danger, fire. Using cheap meters can cause accidents. So, as I said, there's a regulatory agency again regulating the kind of meters that you can use. Installation of meters is a very technical thing because also the operators are saying that, look, people even bypass their meters and they are not collecting. But what is the meter? When you strip the meter of all of its technicality, it's just a measuring device. So it's no different from your bottle of Ragulis or Everwater or Nestle water. It's no different from when you go to the market and your mama customer who sells you gari or beans puts a module, a cup. It's a measuring device to measure how many units. So just like when you go to your petrol station to buy fuel, that pumping station is not only a dispensing station, it's also a measuring station to tell you how many liters of fuel you have received. But you see, we can't leave meters without going back to tariff. We have about 180 million people in the country, depending on who is counting. But let's not focus on the statistical inaccuracy. All the discos today have just about 6 million consumers on their database combined for Nigeria. Are you saying to me that in reality it's only 6 million people that are using electricity in Nigeria? So just imagine the number of people who are using electricity that is not measured, that is not metered and that is free. Out of that 6 million that they have, they've metered about 3 million, inherited and added on. So there's still a gap of close to 50% of that 6 million that needs to be metered. Now, in deciding that tariff, what did we seek to achieve? Was to say, look, stop giving people fixed charges. It's unfair. Take it out. Because there is no fair basis for doing so. In deciding tariff again, what people must understand is that their consumers are classed in different categories. R1, for example, is the most vulnerable consumer. Their tariff is 4 naira per kilowatt hour or something like that. It remains fixed. It wasn't changed. There's a protective policy for the poorest of the poor that if we get power to them, they must not pay more than this. Those are people who don't use just more than a light bulb and radio. They don't have fridge or any big appliances. Then there's R2, one phase. Those are people who have the basics, TV, one fridge. And then there's R2, 3 phase. That's you and I with DSTV, air conditioning and all of that. Those are the people whose tariffs really went up, because they form the real bulk of those who pay for electricity. When you flip it around, it's almost like a type of cross-subsidy. Let those who can afford pay more. Let the poorest of the poor stay where they are. Don't change their tariff. Then we removed through neck the fixed charge. Don't pay fixed charge anymore. We now told the discos, if you get this new tariff, if anybody complains that his bill has gone up and he disputes that bill, that person will only be obliged to pay you his last undisputed bill. You cannot say because your bill has gone up, you are not going to pay. Pay your last undisputed bill. So we know that you are complaining in good faith. You are not trying to game the system. From that point on, the disco cannot disconnect you. If he now insists that you use the power, let him come and prove that you used it. The only way to prove is to measure it. If you say, I drank 1 module of Gari, and you didn't measure it in a module, how do you prove that it was a module? And that was part of the incentive to force the discos to meter. But we also had to give them the incentive. Because people should not forget, meters cost money. On the average, some of the discos that I know have about 300,000-400,000 consumers that they need to meter. And given some of the numbers I've seen, those run into no less than 7, 8, 10, 15 billion to cover all of that. You don't keep that kind of money in your pocket. You must go to a bank. Now, if the bank is going to lend you that kind of money, it wants to see that you can pay. And if you are doing it at the old tariff, clearly no bank will lend you money. It's an unsustainable business. One of the examples I use is like, look, if somebody is selling ice water, and the price of ice block has gone up, and you are saying he can't increase his price, but he should go and buy more bottles. Why is he buying more bottles? To sell to who? He won't recover. So that's one thing people must understand about the philosophy behind the tariff. And the other point to make, and these are part of the things that I hope that people will reflect upon. Many of us, including me, have generators, and we also have inverters. The combined cycle of our inverters and our generators, does it produce 24-hour electricity? It doesn't. Your inverter can only run for about 8 hours. A generator can only run for about 8 hours, unless you want to kill it. And that's 16 hours out of 24. You still have another 8 hours gap. If you combine the cost of the generator and the cost of the inverter and the cost of the diesel to maintain it, how much does it add to generate 16 hours of electricity? And then we expect somebody to generate 24 hours of electricity at a cheaper price. That's one way to look at it. So if you cannot do it yourself at a cheaper price, is it fair to ask somebody to do it at a price cheaper than, and for a period longer? But that's one side of the coin. But the other point, and about increasing power, was that the old tariff did not allow people to buy power at premium except you were a government agency, which was what we did in Lagos. So if, as an example, my diesel cost was like 50 naira a week, and I saw somebody who was going to give me power at 30 naira a week, and the public tariff is about 24 naira a week, there is no reason why I can't take that power at a premium, because it's still cheaper than diesel. But the old tariff did not allow that. It fixed everybody at a cap. So the new tariff, again, we recommended that they should have willing buyer and willing seller. What that would have done, if it hadn't been challenged in court, was that it would have allowed the embedded power that people were asking for to take root in various communities across the country in such a way that those who wanted premium power would take premium power, free up the grid for those who did not want premium power. But again, people have said no, so perhaps they didn't understand. This was a tariff order that was more friendly, ultimately, to the consumer. And as I said, the old tariff was going to be going up. This tariff will start coming down in 24 months on a progressive basis. Now, I also wish to make the point, and I shouldn't lose this opportunity, about, I've said that the R1 were protected and so on and so forth. So, I've had allegations that it was 45%. That is not correct. The reason why it is not correct is that the price of power is not exactly the same in each disco. Just as the price of Gari is not the same in each state. They vary with slight modifications. And so if the prices are not the same, can you increase them to the same amount uniformly? No. How is tariff derived? Tariff derivation starts from the discos, not from NEC. Each disco must hold consultations in its operations area with stakeholders. The law does not say who the stakeholder is. So the law did not mention labor. But each disco must now file a return to NEC, because NEC is the referee to say that, oh, you say you consulted people, wanted to see who attend. They look at their register. They ask for video recordings. And NEC made sure that this happened. And I saw their report. The interesting thing is that representatives of labor were present at those disco meetings. Maybe not in enough numbers, but what is enough numbers is a matter for debate. Did you consult? Yes. They issued advertorials as required in radio. Some use radio and TV. Some use radio, TV, newspaper. Some use only newspaper. Once the publication has been made, did we respond? Were we sufficiently educated? And all of that. I think these were the issues that went on. And we saw the classification of the people that went there. I saw in their report representatives of organized labor who attended and signed with their names, their email addresses, their telephone numbers. So some of the things that have been put out in the public is false, because there is documentary evidence to show that there was consultation. Was there enough consultation? We can continue to debate that. Nobody is ever guilty of over-consultation. But again, can you make a decision if you are trying to find out what happens in an area? You do poll sampling. That's what you do. You don't speak to everybody in order to get opinion about a poll. And that's the whole idea of that. And there is provision in the law that anybody who is not satisfied with the outcome of a tariff pronounced by NEC can file an application to NEC for review. The law didn't say you should go and protest. The law didn't say you should go to court. The law didn't say you should go to parliament. Say go back to NEC. NEC is obliged within 60 days to review it. So all of us must become familiar with the consequence of this reform. But in order to close this part, and it is the most important part of the discussion, is that it is the tariff that gives stability to distribution, to transmission, to generation, and to gas production. If you don't have that stability, if you have all of the generation capacity, the distribution companies won't take power. Just as you have heard, some are rejecting power because they can't sell it. And once it has been sent to them, it can't be stored if they can't will it on. So that was why I expressed my opinion and an appeal to Nigerians. Let's support this. I think it can work. Today, NEC has issued over 100 licenses for power generation. If the tariff is not right, they won't translate to power plants. If we allow this stability to stay, I am convinced, from what I've seen so far, that we can only get incremental power, because power is the real business now that everybody is interested in. And once Nigerians are interested in doing something, they don't lose, they don't give up. They have this energy. You will see the penetration we achieved with GSM. Even those we met ahead of us, we overtook them. So that's why I'm optimistic. But we need to set the ground rules. We've talked about how long the privatization has taken, barely 2 years. We've talked about the transition in knowledge and capacity. People are learning new things. Most of the power plants are very old plants. Most of the transformers are very old, 30, 40 years. They are being refitted slowly. I was in Jeba hydropower plant. I think Jeba was built and commissioned by President Buhari when he was president. Now, part of the maintenance schedule for Jeba was that the turbines will be replaced, will be repaired, and full turnaround service every 6 years. It wasn't done until 2013, almost 30 years later. So how do you expect that to deliver efficient power? The same thing happened in Egmi. Turbines were down, parts were being cannibalized, and so on and so forth. At Oji River Power Station, after cannibalizing the old coal plants, one turbine to save the other, one turbine to, the whole thing finally collapsed. And somebody just said, look, scrap it. So that is what the businessmen have bought. It's the same backbone, similar to the same backbone that the GSM operators, that backbone of 250,000 lines, that was what was sold, that we have 250,000 subscribers, until they built their own over and beyond it, and you now have close to about 100 million subscribers. So that's another analogy. So you will have epileptic power from time to time until all of the equipment is refurbished, changed, upgraded, and more power is built in. But as I said, the focus is incremental power. Now, why is that important? All over the world, machines, turbines break down. The reason you don't notice them in those parts of the world is that they have enough and they have a redundancy. So while one is down, they switch to the other to fix it or to do routine maintenance. If you have only one generator in your house, when it's down, it can't generate power for you while you are repairing it. But if you have two, you have a backup. So this is the context in which to see all of this. But customer service must improve. At our meeting in Enugu, I said to the discourse, you have to lead this reform now by taking ownership. You have to have complaints officers that people can reach. People must understand why there is a problem, how long it will take to solve that problem. That's customer service. And they can wait out a problem if they know. But it becomes more frustrating if they're in the dark, they don't know what is wrong, they don't know how long it will take. And I use examples for them, and I hope that it will change. They need to open more customer service outlets, just like the telcos have done, so that when something is wrong with your SIM card, you can. Some of them are already opening up portals on the internet, which we must also use, because they are trying to cut costs. The more customer care centers they open, the more rental they pay. And you see, when they go and pay rental, nobody wants to accept 1 year rent. You want 3 years rent in advance. So these are part of the cultural issues that you and I must also change, because they can't build all of those facilities. They will need to rent. But I'm sure that their business will be assisted if they see somebody who wants to take 6 months rent rather than 3 years rent in advance. But as the equipment gets upgraded, it gets better. As I pointed out, all of the lines that come to our home now don't belong to NEPA again. They belong to the discos. As they age, they must change them. They must change them within that bandwidth of money they get. Bulk power today for gas is about 13 naira 50 kobo per kilowatt hour. Bulk power. 2 naira 50 kobo for transmission to carry it. You're at 16 naira. The average tariff now is about 24 naira. So there's 16 to 24 is about 8 naira. That's the margin of the disco. To operate its station, to get the power to you, to fix broken transformers, to fix your lines, to get people to come and repair, and so on and so forth. That's the reality. It can be very profitable business in numbers, but it can also be challenging. There's a lot of misinformation being thrown out there by people who claim to know, who either have not verified what they learned yesterday or deliberately seek to mislead the public. Today, the cheapest source of energy is hydro, because it's water. The turbine is driven by the force of water to create electricity. Hydro is incidented, I think, at about 4 cents per kilowatt hour, followed by gas, which is about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. Gas power. Now, if you multiply that roughly by about 199 to 200 naira per dollar, hydro comes to 8 naira per kilowatt hour. Gas comes to about 22 naira per kilowatt hour if you multiply 11 cents by 200. Now, the tariff for solar as we speak, the minimum tariff we have found is 17 cents. So if you multiply 17 cents by 200 naira, you're looking at 34 naira. How do you index tariff of 34 naira for solar on people who are resisting tariff of 24 naira? So it's not cheap. It can get cheaper if we start making the photovoltaic panels here and the cells, but to the extent that they are made abroad, the imported cost of shipping, demurrage at the port, cost of clearing, even though I think electricity equipment has a deep import duty waiver, there's still transport costs. So until we get there, that is why it was difficult to close that transaction. And the condition we had to put there was that you must go and find your own premium buyer that will buy it under the new tariff. Otherwise, the deal is off. Now, people have also come about wind and all of that. First of all, in the last few months, these are the questions I've asked when I got to the ministry. Why are we not using wind? But I knew the answer as governor of Lagos. We don't have the wind speed in these parts because of our location as a country. The minimum wind speeds, I think, are around 8 miles per hour or thereabout. What we have is about 4. Now, at 8, you are constructing your towers at 10 to 15 meters high. At 4, you have to reach over 50, 60 meters high, close to 120 meters to get the revolutions that you want to generate energy. What simply means is that the higher you construct the more the cost of delivering the power, the tariff will be high. So if I can do something on a story building, it means all I need to build is one story building. I'm cheaper, aren't I? If you need to go to 6 stories to do the same thing, you can't be effective. So these are the factual realities that are, quote and unquote, our experts have not told Nigerians. And so the answer is that energy mix. Take the power closest to the fuel source. Make the tariff cheaper. Make production easier. Make evacuation more comprehensive, because you can plan over a while. I think as long as we can excite the investors' confidence, the future for power generation is good. Today, incidentally, I just saw the head of the International Nuclear Agency who visited to assess the progress of Nigeria's nuclear power, because we are already pursuing, from previous administrations, of course, dating back about 15 or so years, a nuclear program. Now, the plan ultimately is to start to produce nuclear energy, 1,200 megawatts at start, expanding up to about 4,800 megawatts as we go forward, because that will be, again, the new power for developing and emerging economies, because most of the global economies, big economies, have signed up to COP21 and the climate change obligations to reduce carbon fuels, and therefore nuclear energy will be alternative energies they'll be looking at, and therefore we will benefit from the technology as we go on. So the future, really, for me, is a very hopeful future. We can ramp up on solar, reduce the cost. We can ramp up on gas, produce more. We can ramp up on hydro, because Zungeru power project is now back on stream. Construction stopped for about 2 years, court cases, until we got all of that out through the initiative and the dedication of the governor of Niger. He was the one who intervened, and construction workers are back on site. About 800 people are working on that site. And and there's so much opportunity for inclusion and jobs if people just allow this thing to play. But we can't force people to do the right things, and that's why I've decided that this discussion is important, to educate people and to let Nigerians also know that it's one thing to elect a government, it's another thing also to stand by your government through the distance. And I think this is the time the government needs the people to stand by it and to tell all of those who seek to obstruct the plans that this government has, there must be a continuing ownership of the policy of government. That is the way you give support. And every time your government looks back, your government sees that you're still there the way you were during the campaigns and during the voting. That's a fuel that government needs to carry on without looking back. I think the biggest contribution will come from communities through whose territories these pipelines pass, to take ownership, to stand as security vanguards for the protection of the pipeline assets, because if the pipelines work, it benefits them more. With the best of intentions, how many kilometers of pipeline could any government really police? And they are as diverse as they are lengthy. So it's a cultural and behavioral remake that we must have, that no matter how aggrieved we are, no matter how upset we are at anything, government assets that deliver power that support the power system, that support the economy of the country, are not things that we can take our anger out against. There is no society in the world that I know, as vexed as they may be in Europe, as vexed as they were in the Arab Spring. They didn't damage their power assets. They didn't damage their gas lines. So, and I think that's the message, really. Those assets must remain inviolate. All of us must protect them as if they were personal assets. And that is when we can then begin to say we will have uninterrupted power. No matter what anybody does, once you take out a gas asset, no matter how much power you have, you shut down the system. From the last outage we had now, it takes days to restore the system back because you have to get the pressure back before you can begin to hook up all the power plants. So it's like when you have a dirty fuel filter in your car, it just begins to jerk. And when you drain the tank and you switch on the engine, clearly you won't have enough fuel, so you need to wait for the fuel line to be suffused with enough fuel for the pump to activate before. So it's the same, it's not different. For me, it's premature to talk about achievements. This is a journey that hopefully will take us to 2019 when the government's scorecard will be assessed. So I don't think that it is perhaps the best time to measure events. Rather, we should measure trends. One of the trends is increased power production, and that's important. But there's still a problem, as I've said. I don't want to talk about energy in terms of megawatt. I want to talk about energy in terms of access. How many more people have more reliable electricity? That's what is important to me. The number of electricity we produce is meaningless if people can't tell me that they're getting it. So, but there are problems along the line. One of the things we've succeeded in doing is building the team to begin to interrelate. That's why we hold those monthly meetings now, because as a ministry, we can't deliver power on our own. We can regulate the GENCOs, we can regulate the DISCOs, and the transmission company. We don't have power over the gas companies. It's another ministry, the Ministry of Petroleum and NNPC, who regulate. So we need to work with them. So these are the partnerships that we have forged together. At those monthly meetings now, there are very senior representatives of those gas companies sitting down with us, taking instructions. So some of the things we've sorted out, for example, at last meeting, NEMSA, the safety agency, we had a complaint from a DISCO that their meters were not approved for use. In that meeting, we resolved it. Within 2 weeks, their meters were approved for use. We have issues with gas to one of the major power plants, the 240 in Lagos. The groups are talking now. They reached an agreement, so they're going to the gas company to get gas. That for me is progress. We had this issue of the unfortunate incident of the young lady who was electrocuted in the University of Lagos. When I stepped in, when I became minister, we stepped in because she had a sibling that also had issues and compensation. We've closed on that, and for me, again, that is progress. We have this court case. There's been a court case that has been in court for about 13 years, since 2000. Well, no, let me put it differently and accurately. There's a contract that was awarded in 2003 for the supply of meters by the old PHCN, and it's ended up in court. So that's for 13 years. We couldn't supply those meters, and people were bickering and fighting. we've taken that case really out of court, and we're trying to close it and hopefully take delivery of the meters that have been locked up in a warehouse, I think about 300,000 meters or so. Hopefully they will be useful for some purpose, I don't know. There's a problem with Aba Disco by Geometric Power Plant. There's 190 megawatts there, and they're having issues, and they're not talking. We brought them to start talking, because if they close, then there's a potential to get 190 megawatts onto the grid. There's a construction project for a transmission line to feed Alaoji power plant and all the way to parts of the southeast and the south-south. Now, part of the problem, there are many problems on that road, but one of the problems was that there was a telecommunication mast belonging to one of the telcos. And let me say this publicly, it belongs to Glo. And I say this publicly because the chairman of Glo must be commended for a sense of patriotism, because they couldn't energize that line. That's one of the problems. There are other problems. And I said, Glo, that I know him, I'll call him. And I called him and I said, look, sir, we have this problem. I don't know who got there first, whether we got there before you or you got there before us. But it is easier to remove a transmission line, to remove your transmission mast, than for us to remove a transmission line that runs over several hundred kilometers. Can you please move, sir? And he said to me, look, it will be done in a week. And it's been done. So we've cleared one problem there. We're moving to the next one. There's still other problems, procurement. And so these are some of the things that have been going on backstage. We are also getting the discos to take on their responsibilities. We've published the names of all of the heads of discos in the newspapers so that people can know who to call if you have a problem in your distribution area. People call me from as far as Borno. Now, there was a line that was damaged during the conflict in Borno. We've restored that line back to operational status. So these are some of the problems we're solving. People call me from Calabar, they call me from Warri, Saple. They don't have power. But people are not also reporting to their discos. So instead of coming to me in Abuja, deal with your discos in your area. So we're populating information out about who to call, how to solve complaints. But as they come also, I must commend the director of distribution in my ministry too. As I send those complaints to her, she's working them down, she's calling the heads of discos. So all of these things are going on, but these are things that shouldn't be escalating to us in Abuja. They should be dealt with at the customer service levels at the state. And consumers too must just get up and doing. If there's a fault, go and report. Sometimes the discos don't know that you don't have power, but they are transmitting and distributing power. But again, as they bring on meters, the smart meters they say they are installing, then hopefully things will get better. And one of the things to say about meters, some of the complaints we've had, and people must, just before they get angry, think. Sometimes when they want to come and install meters, genuinely people are not at home. These are some of the problems. And when you look at some of these mass exercises that we've done, SIM card registration, we always leave it until the last minute. Anyway, that's how BVN, we left it until the last minute. So if they haven't metered the whole of Nigeria for 66 years, suddenly we want everything to be done in 1 year. How really rational is that? Did everybody get a cell phone in the first 2 years? That this was the one you could even go and buy free by yourself. Did everybody get a cell phone? Some people still don't own a cell phone as we speak. So for me, it's a progress of journey, and I'm optimistic that it will be done and it can be done. What was refreshing about it was that at least somebody was offering a genuine alternative. And it was different from the cacophony of complaints that had characterized the industry. And I say this with respect. Many of the commentators just didn't see anything that was right, but they didn't offer a solution. Now, the problem with these alternatives, as I know it, is that, first of all, trucking gas, and I think I read talking about 500 trucks of gas a day overlooks the fact that pricing location of the power plant to the gas source is the key to sustainable power. So when you start trucking 500 trucks of gas every day, who bears the cost of that trucking? Because transportation becomes incidental to the price of gas. And where do you put it in the tariff? The current tariff that we are saying people are still finding hard to accept, then you want to incident cost of transport. You see, and when you look at it, that's why in the past, and even till lately, you had this petroleum equalization fund. That's what they used to, so that the price is the same across the countries. Another subsidy. Can we afford to subsidize power again at this time? I'm not sure we are ready for it. I think when the market plateaus and we actually know where the problems are, government can then come and say, look, I will carry transmission free as my subsidy. We can, and I think we will get there, but it's premature. The market must play. So that is one limitation with that solution. The other suggestion, I think, was the embedded generation. Again, it overlooks the gap between the tariff that I've talked about. So the only way people can have embedded generation is if willing buyer can sell to willing seller. Yesterday at our meeting, one of the complaints we received was simply that the people in GRA in Ikeja, Lagos, had written to NEC and they hadn't yet gotten a response asking that NEC approve for them to buy power from Lagos mainland IPP that we built during my tenure as governor, because they just felt, look, we need only about 2 megawatts of power for all of us in this community. So we will see more of that come into play once the new tariff settles down, because it allows willing buyer to sell to willing seller. We also have applications like that from people in Banana Island that we're looking at, and there are a couple of them like that popping up. There are private companies who are generating their own power, who want to offer more power onto the grid. But again, it's a question of pricing. So that contribution overlooks that one will not happen without the price. It's more expensive to sell small power than it is to sell big power. And I mean that in the sense of coverage. So if you are selling to 1,000 people, your prices are more competitive than if I'm selling to 100 people, I'm going to sell at a premium. But once those people at a premium take their power, then what they were using on public power is freed up for that 1,000. As I said, nobody could ever be guilty of over-consultation with stakeholders. What we are often guilty of is under-consultation. And the point is that this is a representative form of governance. So how many people will be enough consultation? So it's a welcome, that part of it is welcome. Continuous consultation never hurt anybody. But if you spend all your time consulting, you will spend no time doing anything at all. And there are times when you think you have sampled enough, you're right. Because sometimes, to be honest, what you hear is more of the reason why it will not work. I'm always looking for one reason why it will work, so that I go and try it. This job can be done. We can have power, but it will come at a price, not just the price of the tariff, but the price of our own restraints, our sense of understanding that even though electricity works like magic, you just flick a switch, there's a long process that many of us do not see that leads to that magical act. And anybody who disrupts that system really is not a friend of our country, is not a friend of the ordinary people, is not a friend of the champions of change who elected this government.